Well, I'm excited to have you here with me tonight, and it's great to be back with the new media show again. And in tonight's episode, we're going to dive into, is the what's a podcast era finally over? And so that's going to be one topic. And are we move into this liquid content area in the podcasting space? And we're going to dig into what that looks like. And this has been a long running debate about what a podcast is, and hopefully we'll kind of draw that to a close tonight. But I want to welcome to the show Mr. Cliff Ravenscraft, who it's been a long time since I have seen you, and you have been back in part of the podcast space, and I know you're relaunching your shows, and I'm excited to have you here, Cliff, because you're one of those guys that has been around the space a long time, and launching your Podcast AnswerMan show was pivotal to a lot of creators that were getting started, and a lot of the names that we know today as very popular content creators and podcasters, were shaped by your influence. So I think it's great to have you. And then also you're relaunching your podcast A to Z series as well. And that's also terrific too. And so I wanted to ask you, before we get into the body of this content, which is, about, what's the era that we're in and where are we heading, is what was it that caused you to think about bringing the Podcast AnswerMan back? I know that you were doing a bunch of stuff as a speaker and more on the business side of podcasting, and try and encourage people, and I can bring up your website and kind of share with people. So this is the Podcast AnswerMan website that you have today, and I think it's very similar to what you had in the past. I see that your cover art's about the same, but you've updated the image. So, a few years have gone by, but if you could share kind of what that journey has been for you and why you brought it back now.
Sure. And to answer the question why I brought it back is probably going to be important to understand why I left the Podcast AnswerMan brand. So I started podcasting as a hobby in December 2005. And so 2 days ago, I celebrated my 20th year in podcasting. During my first year of podcasting, I had, produced 5 to 7 different podcast shows, and I was producing 7 to 15 podcast episodes a week. And it was all about technology, business, faith, and entertainment. And the number one question I would get out of all of those shows were technical questions related to podcasting. How do I launch a podcast? And by the way, I'm actually creating content, and I'm having the most difficult challenge keeping up with one show every week. How are you producing 7 to 15 episodes every single week? And so all of these technical questions came in, and after about a year of answering everybody individually, I decided to launch in December 2006 Podcast AnswerMan. And what I told people, I said, listen, I don't call myself the Podcast AnswerMan because I have all the answers, but you'll be hard pressed to find somebody who's more passionate about podcasting than I am. And I know where and how to find all of the answers you have, or to all the questions you have related to podcasting. So for the next decade, I devoted myself to answering people's questions related to launching a podcast. And as a result of that, after my first year of doing it, I was earning enough income from teaching people how to podcast that I left my career in insurance after 12 years to become full-time self-employed as a podcast consultant and coach. Over the course of the first 10 years of my business, I am responsible for helping more than 40,000 people launch a podcast. Some of my students have been Dan Miller, Michael Hyatt, Pat Flynn, Amy Porterfield, John Lee Dumas, and I could go on and on and on with top-ranked podcasts and a few Podcast Hall of Fame inductees who were my students during those times. And it was absolutely wonderful. The only thing is that after about 10 to 11 years of answering the same questions over and over again, I recognized that some of the greatest impact that I was having in people's lives was not related to answering what microphone should I use, or how do I get that buzzing sound out of my recording, and what cable do I need for this particular mixer. Instead, I was starting to help people figure out how to predictably, sustainably build income from their podcasting efforts, building an
Yeah.
online business, because that's something that I had gone through a lot of trial and error.
Yeah.
I had found an incredible amount of success, and people were beginning to ask me those questions. Now, economically, I found that there was a lot more return on investment in some of those answers to those questions from people who wanted to build a business. And also, I recognized on a deeper, more spiritual of service level, I
Mhm.
recognized that there were mindset questions and belief systems that were holding people back. People were afraid to charge money. There were people out there that were full-time self-employed, left their day job way too soon, by the way, and they were struggling. They were almost at the point where they're going to be homeless because their mortgage isn't going to get paid. And so helping those people overcome their limiting beliefs and helping them go from charging $50 an hour to charging $300 an hour, or having a 90-minute coaching session where they charge $1,500 a session. This is some of the work that I was doing. There's a lot of long held beliefs that were conditioned in them about money and about all sorts of other things about business. And so what happened was, I began to see a number of people experience radical transformation in their life because I was doing this business strategy and mindset coaching.
Yep.
And I had more and more work for that. People were willing to pay me a lot more money than as a podcast consultant helping you launch a podcast. And I was struggling back in the day because I was getting 50 to 100 quote unquote quick questions on every technical challenge you could possibly imagine. Now, I had the answer to those questions, but to answer them took 6 to 8 or 10 hours a day. And I just couldn't keep up. It wasn't
Yeah.
sustainable for me. And I had so many people who wanted business strategy and mindset work that I decided to draw a line in the sand. This is the work that I'm really passionate about. And I'm just not as passionate about answering these same things that I've been doing for the last 12 years.
Okay.
So that's why I left Podcast AnswerMan. In fact, I took my Podcast AnswerMan podcast after 439 episodes, and I just overnight rebranded it. Now, I say overnight. I did rebrand it overnight, but I let people know a whole year in advance. In
Right.
2015,
It's a big buildup is what you did over time, right?
it was overtime. So in
Yeah.
2015, I did a series called The Year of Identity. I was going through an identity crisis. Who am I if I'm not the Podcast AnswerMan? And then after finally going through that, one night I switched it over. It became Podcast AnswerMan. When you went to bed at night was in your podcast app. And then when you woke up the next morning, the next episode dropped and you were subscribed to a podcast called The Cliff Ravenscraft Show. And by the way, I just produced episode number 802 of that
Oh.
show this week.
Wow.
So that's what happened from 2015 to 2017. I was the Cliff Ravenscraft Show, but I was still the Podcast AnswerMan. So for 2 years, I was still leading my podcasting A to Z course, which is a 4-week group training program where I walk you through step by step, answer every single question you have related to getting your podcast launched. And so I was doing that for 2 years, while during that 2 years as the Mindset AnswerMan as well, I was helping people launch businesses. I was hosting in-person workshops, live events, doing one-on-one coaching and paid mastermind groups. And then finally in December 2017, I finally had replaced my income from Podcast AnswerMan. It's like, okay, I don't have to answer technical questions to be able to maintain the incredible lifestyle that my business has provided for me.
Yeah.
And so I went all in on Mindset AnswerMan. I launched an annual conference called Free the Dream. It was an incredible experience. It was going to be annual. Did it in 2018, 2019. I was hosting.
And then COVID.
Exactly. And then COVID happened.
Yeah.
And when COVID happened, it basically took my new identity that I had built for myself, which was so dependent on live events and showing up and speaking at other people's events.
Yeah.
And that's where a majority of my new clients came from, was
Mhm.
through meeting people at events. COVID took that away, and then I'm like, well, who am I if I'm not the mindset answer man?
Right. Yeah.
And there was this season, and I've had an incredible amount of success during the first few years after the pandemic, but over the last year and a half, I'd noticed that, wow, because I'm not attending as many events, because I'm not hosting as many live events, the top of my funnel is just not nearly what it used to be. And there were a couple of things that converged that brings back Podcast Answer Man for me. Number one, I've never stopped loving podcast. You mentioned earlier that I'm bringing back my shows. I'm actually only bringing back one show. It's Podcast Answer Man.
Right.
But I don't know, Rob, if you know, but I will share for everyone else. I have produced over 50 different podcast shows in the last 20 years.
It's a lot.
I have published more than 4,800 podcast episodes, and
Yep.
it's Wednesday. I've already published 3 this week.
Yeah.
So the only thing that's back is Podcast Answer.
That's Answer Man. Okay.
All right.
Awesome.
So I've
Yeah.
never left podcasting.
Yeah, well, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great to hear. And I think it's great that you're coming back in, because I think it's a very interesting time in podcasting. And the topic that we're going to dive into a little bit more tonight is this, this concept of eras in podcasting, and is podcasting moving into this what I would call probably the fifth stage. I'm actually titling it. The very first era in podcasting I consider to be the zero era, which means that it was the very beginning. And so we saw these various stages, and this came out in an article from Stephen Goldstein, who's a consultant in the podcasting space. He's got a newsletter that everybody in the industry reads, and he's been painting this picture for a while about these different eras in podcasting. And I always push back on Steve, because Steve's perspective on this podcasting space reflects a lot of the folks that are more recently entered the podcasting medium, and they forget about probably the first 6 or 7 years of the medium. Back when video podcasting was about 40% of the market, and then all of a sudden YouTube launched and started siphoning away all those video creators that were using RSS, and they started hosting them over on YouTube. And so YouTube and podcasting have had a parallel track for most of both's existence. I think YouTube started very closely to the same time frame that podcasting started. And so when people in this industry talk about, the 4 eras of podcasting, they forget that early stage, which I think, in my own opinion, of course I'm biased too, it is the most important one to drive the context of what's happening today. And that's the re-entry of video, right? And we went through this era where we were considered to be an audio first medium. That's just because everything was being pushed over to YouTube. And then all of a sudden, when YouTube decides that they're going to have a podcast playlist, all of a sudden it comes crashing back again. And so do you have any views on this big picture before we dive into each of the eras?
Yeah, I think it'll be an interesting dialogue, because I saw the outline for our show, and
Yeah.
I don't know that you and I agree on
Mhm.
the overall premise. So I definitely understand everything that with this whole liquid era that I think you're going to introduce, and the hopefully putting an end to the debate of the definition of a podcast and things
Yeah.
like that. Although there might be some defense for the term podcasting and RSS feed. So it'll be an interesting dialogue.
Yeah, it's not to say that the term podcast is going away. I'm not saying that at all.
Yeah.
Actually, probably I should emphasize this, that it's bigger than ever, and it will continue to be bigger than ever. It's just there's kind of 2 ends of the spectrum. There's how the audiences see what a podcast is, and how the creator sees what a podcast is what's been parting. And so that's in this ongoing debate about this fluid concept is really a metaphor. It's not anything more than that. It's just
Yeah.
how when you're a creator, just like with this show is a good example of it. I'm creating it as a live stream. I take the episode out of here. I download it off of StreamYard and I put it out as an audio and video podcast. And I have both feeds. I have two separate feeds for this show.
Yep.
It's not commonly done anymore. That comes out of the earlier era, which I term as the zero era. And so let me pull up on the screen here
You
kind
and
of
Lee,
a
you and Leo Laporte.
well,
I'm still
well,
subscribed to Leo Laporte's video for Mac Break Weekly and his video feed for
yeah, that's right.
This Week in Tech. So and he has audio only feeds for those, but because it's video first content, I only will subscribe to the video RSS feed. Ironically, though, I refuse to watch his content on YouTube. And if you're interested, I'll share why at some point.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Yeah, so what I pulled up on the screen here for those that can see the video portion of this, we'll run down and make sure that all of our audio listeners are following along here. But I'm calling kind of the first like 5 or 6 years of podcasting, or 7 years or so, as the zero era of podcasting. Others in the industry are only looking at 4 eras in podcasting, and really because the very early era, the zero era, is the era that had audio and video, which has been somewhat forgotten in the current landscape. And then era number 1, which Stephen Goldstein refers to as the MeUndies era, audio first, very intimate, host read ads were big, early monetization, and a fairly simple ecosystem was the early era of podcasting. That goes back probably to the 2009 timeframe of when audio was really starting to find its own way, and then we had serial, and everything changed. And then era 2 is the spaghetti against the wall era, where there was a lot of big money, big acquisitions. I mean, that's when Spotify started going on a buying spree and buying up a bunch of platforms, and a lot of the radio industry entered the medium with big money, big expectations of what they were hoping they could create, as they saw their market share of their radio consumption start to tick down a little bit, which has been slow, but it hasn't been a fast track. And then the last era, before we get to the current era, is era 3, which everybody's asking this question. Of course, all along people were asking the question, well, what is a podcast? But especially when we got into this era where a lot of the big media companies, radio and television companies, which were involved in podcasting even back in the zero era, there's huge numbers of major media companies that were involved in the early era of podcasting that exited for a few years. And that left this window of opportunity for the first era to kick in, where it became really much more audio first. Because a lot of these big media companies in the early years of podcasting just didn't know how to monetize it, right? And putting out video content was expensive. It took bandwidth, it took resources, it took expertise that they didn't. A lot of these people didn't have. Was, dynamic ad insertion wasn't around yet. This concept of host reads was just taking off, and it wasn't really an established ecosystem of business development people that were able to go into brands and sell this content. That took a few years to develop. That didn't really enter the medium until we really got into the era 2, which is the spaghetti against the wall, and that's when we started, really experimenting and playing around with monetization on an increasing scale. So, yeah, did you want to add anything before I draw context into what is a podcast, Cliff?
Well, the one thing I'll just say is what is a podcast? I remember that being the number one question, even in the era 0 day.
Yeah, it was.
And,
Yeah.
and for me, it's still a question that's very prevalent today. So, but
well,
yes.
I think, what's different about the era 3 in the what is a podcast, because I agree with you 100%, going back all the way to 2004, that's what was driving things was, and I think the what is a podcast thing really in the era 3 was really because video started to enter the space, and YouTube was pushing by creating this playlist idea. And this was just a couple of years ago that I think that we were in the era 3. It really created an identity crisis in the medium. Conferences were, having a lot of debates about video, and AI can be thrown into this mix too. But really, it was around, well, what is a podcast? Do we want to include video in the definition of what a podcast is? And that was really what was going on in that era. And then if you fast forward to where we are more today, in what people are seeing as the difference, and I can pull up a slide that I created for that, is trying to run down what the concept of the era 4, which is the era that we're in right now, is what Stephen is coming up with. And that quote at the bottom of what's on the screen, the show itself is no longer the final product. It's the engine that drives a bunch of other things. That's a quote from me that he used. And so what this is really all about is this liquid content era, is that it's almost being looked at as almost like a liquid content operating system of sorts. We're creating an ecosystem that is much bigger than what it has been. And we are slowly becoming less podcasters and more content creators. And you can see this in what Spotify has done by changing the name of their podcast platform to Spotify for Creators, is that there has been this move, and I know YouTube and other platforms are starting to use this term creator, because podcasting is becoming kind of like one aspect of being a creator now. And it's not a central part. It's podcasting is fueling everything else. But the definition is getting a little bit broader. That doesn't change the definition of what a podcast is. It just makes it more inclusive of what's going on in the world today. I know. Go ahead and throw your thoughts in, Cliff.
Yeah, I definitely love and identify as a content creator, and I do like that language. And I would say that I have been a content creator since 2005. So that hasn't changed. I'm still a podcaster too. And there are, and the thing is though, is there are a number of people out there who are content creators and they are not podcasters. So and there's a distinction, and that's why I think there's still this thing that why that definition is important. What defines a podcast? What makes a podcast a podcast? What are the benefits of actually the RSS feed that YouTube does not offer, or any other streaming audio or video platform?
Yeah.
The other thing is that statement that the podcast itself is no longer the final product. What I would say from my perspective is that the podcast is a final product. YouTube channel and content for my YouTube is a final product. Short form video content that's produced for YouTube Shorts, Facebook and Instagram Reels, and TikTok. Short form 3-minute or less 9:16 video is a final product. Those are all different products that as a content creator I can do. So I'm a podcaster, I'm a YouTuber, I'm an Instagrammer, I'm a Facebook Reeler, I'm a TikToker, I'm a content creator.
Yeah. So I think the analogy that's trying to be drawn here is that the podcast is like fuel in your engine, right? It's what drives the audience engagement.
I believe that a podcast for some people can be the fuel that drives things. However, I know a lot of content creators that are crushing it with engagement on TikTok, but don't have a YouTube channel and don't have a podcast. And a podcast, when they've attempted it, did nothing to fuel their growth. So I don't know that I can buy into that the podcast is what fuels the everything. If that's what's being said.
I think what's being said is that the show, it didn't say podcast. It said the show that you create, the content is being sliced and diced so much and put out. All of these different, like the audio feed, the YouTube, the vertical clips, the live streams are all in a lot of ways, they are rather unique mediums, right?
Yes.
In of themselves. So when you create a show, that show can be turned into a podcast as a RSS distribution, or it can be turned into a live show. It can be distributed on YouTube. It can be utilized in a lot of different ways. And I think that's the analogy that's trying to be drawn here.
I can
Yeah,
appreciate that. The one
yeah,
thing that I find that is kind of, by the way, we didn't get into that one part, which is why am I returning as the podcast answer man?
yeah, right.
Because I am such a passionate advocate for podcasting. What I have noticed is the number of people who are giving up on podcasting because they are overwhelmed by feeling like they have to they have to put a video of them recording their show on YouTube, and they have to hire somebody to, or pay for a service like Opus Clip to chop it up and post 3 to 5 days and feed
Yeah,
algorithms of video content.
yeah,
Otherwise, they can't keep up with the content creator Joneses out there. And
yeah,
and one of the reasons why I'm coming back as the podcast answer man is for those who are overwhelmed by all that video production. I want to help them reduce the feeling of being overwhelmed. I think there are ways to go about it in a different way than maybe that's causing you all this overwhelm. And if you want to do video, there's a way to do it well. There are
yep,
frameworks and strategies, and I'm more than happy to help you. But for a lot of people, not everyone, but for a lot of people, there's no reason for you to put a video camera on while you're recording your show. You can actually create an audio only podcast and never have a camera in the room while you do it. But then you could still, if you want to, still be a YouTuber and a TikToker and a short form content creator and build audience over there. But my recommendation is that you don't just take the audio clip and then throw some AI images over top of it and then put it out there hoping people will listen to your podcast one day, because that's just not going to happen.
yeah. I think there's a lot of different ways to slice this, and I think that's what's challenging for a lot of creators now is, and if you consider to be a podcaster, I think that's terrific. These are concepts that are reflective of what I'm seeing happen in the industry, and as I talk to people even outside of the United States, like I talked to a fellow that's very very influential on the continent of Africa. I did a call with him. He happened to be in Nigeria, and he was telling me that most of the new people that are coming into podcasting, at least in Africa, are coming at it from a video first
And I
approach.
love that. I think
Yeah,
it's wonderful.
yeah,
And for those who are not intimidated by video, I think it's great. And that's what
yeah,
as the podcast answer man, I recognize that I'm going to be asked to help support a lot of those video first content creators. And my thing is that if you
well,
want to be a podcaster, we're going to have to talk about, are you going to release the video as a video file in a podcast RSS
yeah,
feed?
yeah.
And or are you going to strip the audio from that show that you did video first and put it out as an audio feed? And what are the implications for your audience as a second class citizen if you refer to things that are on the video during the show? And what are the implications of that? And so these are the things I'm helping people discern moving forward.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is kind of a juggling situation. I've been trying to figure it out myself with the shows that I'm doing, is trying to create what I consider to be a hybrid show, not a video first or a audio first, but one that is producing content that will work in both directions. And increasingly, the RSS feed for this particular show, um, I have separate RSS feeds. I have
Yep.
one for audio and one for video, and then in each of those now, I have a link to the other media file. So I have in the video feed, I have an alternative enclosure to the audio episode, and then in the audio primary feed, I have a alternative enclosure link to the video version. So, which in some ways you could say reasonably that is over redundancy. but if you want to play in the entirety of the ecosystem that exists today, with the podcasting 2.0 tags, that's the way to do it, because there are some newer apps that are starting to gain a little bit of market share that are supporting that capability of having a primary audio feed with a secondary video, and then a primary video with a secondary audio experience in their app. And so that's what I'm playing into. And then you look at even what Spotify is doing today, which is really kind of breaks all this stuff, which
Yep.
is they allow you to import an RSS feed with a MP3 file link in it, via RSS. But then if you upload a video to their platform, they'll basically kill the audio via RSS
Which
and
might
replace it with the audio from the video,
Yeah,
right?
I've heard of that,
Yeah.
that they're doing that. And
Yeah.
here's my situation is that I will produce sometimes the video version as a live stream on my YouTube channel.
Well, like we are right now. This is a
Exactly.
classic
But then
example.
and I will leave that unedited. It'll just be raw, and all the mistakes or anything just completely unedited. And it might be an hour and 10 minutes long. But
Yeah.
then I actually take the audio and I go in and fine tune that production. I edit it down. The end result is a 48-minute audio episode that's really dialed in for the audio listener. And
Yeah.
so I don't know how, supposedly Spotify is supposed to be able to click a button, you can switch back and forth, but I don't know how you do that if the video that you uploaded is an hour and 10 minutes and the video audio file is 48 minutes dialed in and edited. So it's confusing. I don't understand why they've done that. It's something I'm going to be looking into, seeing how to do it and what are some of the best practices moving
Yeah.
forward for those who want to engage with that functionality in Spotify.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a simplistic view of what should be done, on Spotify's part. I think it's a mistake on their part, to be
Oh,
quite
big
honest with
one.
you, because the optimal way of doing this is that just because you record it, in a video, and you put it out as an audio, it doesn't have to be the same audio. That
Not at all.
that's the thing, and it probably shouldn't be the same audio, because
There
I
should
can
be a there
do.
should be a listing in Spotify for the video and a listing for the spot in Spotify for the audio.
Right,
And
and they
that's how
come
they
from 2 different places. It doesn't come from the audio. I believe what Spotify is doing actually is that when you upload the video, they they are they are saying that you're playing audio, but what you're actually playing is the video.
Yeah,
It's not displaying the video. All it's just doing is just playing the audio. And so they basically hacked this whole system, so there's no way for you to have a experience with your show that has a different version with the audio than you have with the video. And so that's what I do with this show is that I will do a deeper edit on this show on the audio side, produce it a
exactly.
little bit differently, and put that separately in the RSS feed. And the video, I don't edit as heavily because it just chops it up. It makes it for a horrible viewing experience.
The jump
So
cuts are just too much. It's like
yeah, right.
I can edit like a razor blade in audio, but
Yeah,
in video
you
that is
can't do
just
that. You
too
just
choppy.
can't. You just can't do that.
Yeah.
And so that's my philosophy. So I think,
Sometimes I'll take
yeah.
something I said at 47 minutes and put that into 22 minutes in a show and then go back and forth, and the lighting outside, the sun's at different angles.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, a good example for this show is that intro that I played, that intro video has a music bed to it, that plays in, and on the audio version, I don't want that music bed to play without, some context. So what I do is I take the music bed out and I will layer it under the audio, for most of it, and I'll only play just a few seconds of the audio at the beginning of the music. So that's what's different about it. So like on the video, I can get away with a longer kind of music bed because there's something for the visual audience to see.
Something
And yeah,
I ran into, Rob, is when as I said, I've got over 4,800 audio episodes, and almost all of those are in Spotify and also
yeah,
YouTube. And my problem is that people who are subscribed to my shows there are about 50 to 100 episodes in a podcast feed for any individual show. that are not accessible to you as a subscriber in Spotify and or YouTube. And that's because Content Match said, Cliff, you did not have rights to that. And so we're deleting this episode out of the feed. And what happened was I actually paid for royalty-free music. I own the license,
Oh.
but it was still registered in their system, and so it got a content match, and I had the option to go in and submit a grievance against every single one of those, but I had so many that I'm like, listen, just go ahead and delete it out of the feed. That nobody should be listening to a podcast on Spotify or YouTube anyway. That was my thing. I know
Yeah.
that it is a primary source of listening to podcasts today. I know Spotify is a powerhouse for subscribing to a podcast today. I know that YouTube has become a major source of podcast listens, even audio.
Yeah. Well,
But
I mean,
the problem is
Apple
that
still is king.
Apple is still
Initially.
king, I know.
Yeah.
But here's the thing though. If you subscribe to me, Cliff Ravenscraft, in either Spotify or YouTube, some of my content you have no access to because Spotify
Blocked it.
and YouTube has blocked it. They've removed your access to it, which is why I like to have a direct relationship with my subscriber via an RSS feed.
So, what one kind of contextual thing that I want to bring into this conversation too, and you can expand on this too, and is this thing that what you did is that you created a successful podcast and you migrated to becoming a speaker and creating other types of content. And then, because you were really kind of leading the charge in a lot of ways in the early years because of the professionalization that you had with your show. And so you saw this opportunity with these other creators to help them kind of professionalize of sorts, right? And
Yeah.
get to that higher level, get on stages, be a presenter, help them kind of build more of a lifestyle kind of business related kind of business with their podcast. And I think, I was thinking about this as I thought about you, is that maybe what happened to you to some degree is that the industry kind of got professionalized and didn't need that help quite as much anymore. And so now it's your time to come back home of sorts, which
Well,
is the roots of podcasting. It's really your roots. And it also is, like we talked about earlier, it's the engine of all this stuff now.
Well,
Right.
I will say I read that kind of feeling of how you might have perceived my leaving of the industry.
Yeah.
It was not the industry that caused me to leave. It was more along the line the sustainability of the work that I wanted to do. I love building a
Yeah.
business of one. I'm a solopreneur. And I
Right.
did not want to hire a team of people to answer technical questions on my behalf or on behalf of my
Right.
brand. It's just not what I wanted. And
Yeah.
so I made an intentional decision to divorce my identity from Podcast AnswerMan so I could build a reputation as a
Right.
business strategy and mindset coach. And so I went that way. And now coming back, what I do love about this is I still love helping people. I still love serving people. And more than ever, people are struck because there's so many different opinions on what is a podcast and what you should be doing as a content creator. You
Yeah.
must be on YouTube. It might be a good reason. Let's talk about it. Let's build a strategy. Let's figure this out. But there's a lot of people who could benefit from still moving forward, creating an audio only podcast and never turning a camera on, never having a YouTube channel. It is possible in 2026, 27, 28 to create a massive following and to generate amazing financial success in building a business without ever playing around with all the algorithm content. What is that? The discoverability channels and feeding algorithms and all this. Those are great. They serve a purpose and they might be something that is a great fit for you. But if not, I want to be here to help. So I'm coming back to help all these people who are overwhelmed and just don't know which direction, who to listen to. And
Yeah.
it's not that I want them to listen to me and my opinions, because I do have opinions. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah. Well,
I
we
brought
expect-
back I brought back Podcast AnswerMan. And guess what? Episode 475 and 476 are in the feed. You will not find any clip of any video of the recording of either of those shows because there was no camera involved.
Right.
So I have opinions, but my thing is I want to have conversations with people and say, let me tell you about the people I know who are succeeding and crushing it with all of these other channels in addition to their podcast. Some of them are their actual show is a video show, and the audio is just as awesome as the video without all of this other stuff. We could talk through, but let's talk about all of the nuances, the things you need to actually have in your production workflow to make everything line up with what your desired outcome is. And let's get clear on that, and then discover a purpose for you. And how many people have access to somebody who has 20 years of experience and watched all these people and are like, now is the time for me to come back.
Yeah. Well, just looking at your video, Cliff, it brings me back a little bit. Do you know why?
The passion and enthusiasm?
No.
What
it's
is
something visually on your screen.
I don't know what it is. The high LPR 40.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
exactly what it is. We're talking about two different eras here. So we have the early years of podcasting is the high LPR 40. The later years of podcasting is the Shure SM7B, right?
Yep.
And now I'm starting to see with some of the top podcasters, there's a Sennheiser that's starting to show up in a lot of podcasters now. It's a long, thin microphone that's not as big and bulky as these are, that can just slide in the image, and it's hard to see it. And then more and more people are using these boom mics.
I'm going to see if I can't help solve that issue.
You're going to solve it?
Okay. I'm going to try.
Yeah. Well, and part of my view on this is that it could be seen as a sign, especially the boom mics, that maybe there's less of an emphasis on audio quality,
that's one of the reasons I'm coming back.
Right. Which is indicative of a kind of like a TV mindset, right? If you think about television, the lavaliers and the boom mics and all this, the overhead mics with the big fuzzy on it and stuff like that were the big thing that a lot of the broadcasters used. And so now we're coming into an era where podcasting is seen as kind of like the next generation of broadcasters, right? So, we just happen to be calling ourselves podcasters or creators now instead of, anchors on network news. And so now we're starting to see this evolution back to some of the production practices that were used by mainstream media. And it's always been a criticism, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, that the audio is always what was put to the side. It was like, it's good enough, right? It's more the visual that we're concerned about because we're television, right? And I think that there's a danger of that to some degree. That's
big danger. Back. A big danger for anybody that you want to listen to your show via an audio RSS feed. It's a big danger because it's annoying to listen to somebody's boom microphone audio quality.
I mean, it can be. I mean, the other
it can be done well.
Yeah. The other truth of the matter is that back in the early years, we didn't have the post-processing ability that we have today to create a studio quality recording or video track, audio in the video track, and improve the audio, right? The question gets back to, is anybody going to be doing that to their video?
But if they work with me, they will.
Yeah. Okay.
Matter of fact, one of the things that's changed, I don't know if you've brought this up in the show a lot, but one of the biggest things in the industry is podcast audio creators. I am making a huge recommendation that you get away from 44.1 kilohertz sample rate at 16-bit audio, and
instead go to 24.
Yeah, you've got to go to 48 kilohertz, or you got to go to a 48K and a 24 kilohertz or 24-bit audio. And the reason why is because if you're going to do video and you're going to have multi cameras and you want to have your high quality, super amazing audio file sync up in software with that video, you're going to have to record it in 48 kilohertz and 24-bit. Otherwise, you have syncing issues. You start drifting your audio track and you don't have lip sync right.
Oh, yeah. So is there any possible conflict with like web players or something like that could come into play?
There used to be, and if we were still living in 2006, 2007, we'd run into issues, but today there's not.
Today there isn't. Well, that's good. I hadn't really investigated that to find out if there were some lingering issues with some of the platforms, but I guess those are probably not very popularly consumed platforms anyway.
I know that I've been producing content at 48 kilohertz, and it has it has not produced anybody saying, "Oh, Cliff, I'm having a problem. I can't hear this."
So what does that do to the bit rate playback? Does that mean that you can use lower bit rate?
So what basically your bit rate needs to match whatever your camera's audio is.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying is you've got all of these different cameras, and what you do is you load them up into your video editing software. And so you'll just line all of those camera recordings up, and it will sync the audio from each camera perfectly. But none of those cameras are going to have the highest quality audio. And so you ideally will have an audio only recording that is capturing the highest quality audio. And then you take that and you do your production, your post-production on that audio. It makes it sound amazing. And then what you can do is you drag that audio file and it syncs it up with all of those video files. But if your sample rate is different, than the video files audios, it won't sync. You'll get your audio will be out of sync with your lips.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how you record it too, right? I mean, if you're recording separately than from your video, then there could be an issue there, right? So, like with this show, I'm actually recording it in one platform, the audio and the video, so I shouldn't have any of those issues. But when I do the MP3 file, I can create it in whatever file I want. It won't impact the video. But is the bigger picture that you're offering here, Cliff, is it that we should up the game on the quality of the audio, and does it impact the file size?
It does impact the file size slightly. It's not a big thing. I mean, gosh, back in the day, we talked about the fact that video podcasting was back in 2005. Those were the days. This was before smartphones.
I know.
We didn't remember Edge as a speed for the first iPhone.
I do. Actually, I worked for a startup company in Seattle called Mobilecast that was putting podcasts on pre-smartphone devices back in 2005.
So back in the day, I was actually producing my show, and then I would actually sometimes reduce it down to mono files, and drop it down to 96 kilobits per second, so that people wouldn't have to have this massive 22 megabyte file back in the day. Now, now my episode,
it even got crunched more because the Razor phones in the early years wouldn't, and the data plans didn't have that much speed to them. They were pretty slow, and so you had to crunch the audio down. I think we streamed on the Mobilecast platform. I think we streamed at like 8K.
Yeah, but you look at Apple Music and Spotify, and all of them are doing their uncompressed, full FLAC and whatever files these days. And I'm just wondering how long before podcasting just starts releasing uncompressed WAV files.
Well, we could probably do it today.
Well, we could. Many apps, I think, are not going to support it, and certainly a lot of podcast hosts don't support it.
Well, there's nothing to stop you from using a pretty high bit rate on your MP3 file.
This is correct. I've released the 320 kilobit per second file.
Boy, Cliff, we're really geeking out here.
I know.
There's lots of ways that you can do this, especially on the audio side. I think that there's a lot of ways that we can improve because we do have the bandwidth now to
Yeah.
actually do that. But the question that you have to ask is, unless you're really concerned about your recording quality and your recording environment, you know, offering that file at a much higher bit rate may not offer much of an improvement.
This
So
is true. There are a couple of things that are going on in the world today. AI processing of audio files to take something that would have been a 4 out of 10 in my world, because I'm an audio snob. There is the potential these days that AI can bring something almost from a 4 out of 10 all the way up to like a 8 or 9 out of 10. And that is amazing. Now, that functionality, the AI audio processing to bring it to studio quality, has been around for at least 8 or 9 years, but it's only just been recently at a level where it doesn't have the audio artifacting that
yeah,
makes it sound overly digital and
right,
digitized. And
right.
so it is amazing. I was recently watching somebody's speaker reel on their website, and they were giving a live workshop in some sort of echoey chamber room, and I didn't it's like, man, I would never put a speaker reel with my audio of that as my professional speaking.
Mhm.
This needs to be run through one of those AI studio enhanced audio things, because you would sound like a professional mic'd person in a beautiful auditorium rather than seemingly in some corporate cafeteria.
Yeah. Well, there's platforms now like, the Adobe podcast platform. There's, Nomano, which is a Norwegian company that's building a terrific kinda mobile recording studio that you can use, that you can record anywhere, and it
Yeah.
will optimize it to sound great. And I also wanted to mention to those that are watching this, at the end of the show, I'll pull up your questions and your comments that you post in the threads, and we can talk about them. And you can pose a question to Cliff if you want to, or to me, and we'd be happy to talk about it a little bit. So go ahead and jump in there and post. I see that there's a few people that have posted in there already, but we would love to have more of you. So anyway, but Cliff, there's a lot of things that have changed about podcasting over the years. The entrance of so much diversity in the medium, so much global influence of people around the world. You know, James Cridland, I don't know if you're a follower of podnews.net, but he's really changed the podcasting space dramatically and turned it into a really international medium. And when I say that, I'm really talking about awareness, right? Because
Mhm.
awareness of the scope of podcasting and this new media landscape is so much bigger than what we had seen for many years in the United States. We had a very siloed view of what was happening with this medium, and we weren't really seeing what was going on in the UK. We weren't seeing what was going on in Asia. We weren't seeing what was going on in Africa and in the Middle East. And what's going on in those countries right now is remarkable. And in a lot of ways, those areas are leapfrogging what we went through, Cliff, and what we had to get through because we were plowing new ground, and they're just kind of jumping forward and starting to build really strong ecosystems and having conferences and having creators that are coming from all sorts of backgrounds and languages and stuff. And this, I'm under pressure with the Podcast Hall of Fame now to really turn that into an international event, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to. It's not an easy thing to take on, but I don't
Well,
know. Give us your thoughts on that, about how podcasting has changes from an international perspective, the diversity side, audiences. Yeah.
yeah, it is. I love that podcasting is getting a more international feel and vibe to it. I want to give a shout out to Mike and Isabella Russell,
Yeah.
who were very
They're
early
terrific.
in bringing the UK podcasters and European podcasters all together. Actually, they brought an entire global audience to New Media Europe when they were hosting that. I want
Yep.
to give a shout out to Paul Spain from New Zealand,
Yeah.
who hosted the very first ever Asia Pacific podcast conference in Auckland. So it has been tremendous to see a little bit more of that international flair, and I'd be delighted if all of a sudden stuff over in Europe and the UK and Asia and Asiatic countries, I would be delighted if their podcasting industry events eclipsed what has happened in the US, and I wouldn't be surprised if they do.
Well, in some ways, that's kind of happened in London with the podcast
That's what
show.
I've heard. I
Yeah,
just heard. I recently here's something that's interesting, Rob. So when I left the podcasting space back in 2017, ironically, I stopped following industry related news related to the industry for those however many years.
yep,
And I only kept up with what was necessary for me to continue my production the way that I wanted to do my production. And so
yep.
ever since I made the decision to bring back Podcast AnswerMan and to bring back podcasting A to Z, I'm having conversations like this with you and so many other people who have been in the space for the past 20 years like I have, but also people who have been very heavily invested since I left, and I'm cramming every single day. I'm
You
like,
got a lot
okay,
to catch up on.
I have a lot to catch up on, but yeah, I recently heard about this the podcast show in London and how it actually eclipsed the size of what's been done here.
Yeah, and it's really kind of a completely different format too. I mean, it's in a smaller venue, which is terrific. I'm a big fan of that. Yeah, I went to the first one of them. I haven't been back in a couple of years, but it's completely different. There's the rooms and the sessions are just packed with people. And you can also buy a 1-day ticket, so people can just go to one day. It's a 2-day event. So what they were seeing was close to 5,000 people each day
Yeah,
go to that. So
that's
and
awesome. How
and they
did they
weren't always the
handle?
same people. They weren't always
Were they in English? I mean, because that's the interesting thing. When you go international, you've got a lot of people with diverse languages, and it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out, and especially with the ability for what did they call it, auto translation or auto dubbing or whatever that's happening today, and it
yeah.
kind of mimics your voice. I know YouTube was really heavy into that a couple of months back, or maybe a
Well, I
year
think
or
they
so back.
still are. They still
Are they
are.
still doing that?
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting as well. I mean, especially thinking about how I, as a audio content creator, I create video content as well, but as an audio first content creator, imagine myself maybe releasing different podcast feeds in other languages. That that's possible today.
Yeah, I think it can be automated too. It can
Yeah,
be,
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
yeah, I mean, it can be done that way. It's currently being done, I believe, in YouTube right now. So I think
Yep.
that, we're already on that track of being a multi-language, medium, which I think historically podcasting has been kind of an English language medium of sorts, but I think technology was holding us back on that.
Yeah.
So,
It'd be interesting though, because I think about just the way I do storytelling, the inflection of the voice, and
right.
you linger on a word. You've got an odd word that only means something to certain people from a certain era and all this other stuff, and
Yep.
how much can get lost in translation, and yet people are hearing my voice. I've heard stories, by the way, of people who are already experiencing this. Pat Flynn had his channel as one of the pilots for this auto dubbing, and he had somebody come up to him at a conference and they spoke to him in some other language because they assumed Pat spoke their language
Oh,
because they consume his content through that
yeah.
auto dub. And he's like, yeah,
Yeah. Well, that's what it is, right?
yeah,
It can happen, and it's interesting, how the world is getting closer and coming together, and media is driving that, right?
yeah.
So a lot of the things that are being done in a podcast today have global implications, have global impact, and so that's where we're seeing, I think this shift towards audiences, really, and unfortunately, algorithms are actually driving a lot of what the content creators are doing now.
That's the one
Um,
thing I've always loved, Rob, about this platform. This right here is just about 1,000 different handwritten letters, postcards, and thank you notes from people in every country around the world.
Over
And
what time span is that?
over 20 years.
Over 20 years.
Over 20
Oh,
years. I've got over 1,000 different thank you cards, postcards, and handwritten letters. Just every time one comes in the mail, it goes into this file. And
yeah.
but I share that because it's a global thing. I mean, I've got Sri Lanka, I've got Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, I've got China, I've got everywhere, every country on the planet. And to think that a guy in Northern Kentucky who started out on his living room floor talking into a $32 or $35 headset with a little plastic boom microphone, and I'm talking to a global audience, that China can't even keep my audience from listening to me,
Yeah.
let alone YouTube or Spotify.
Well, and even Russia can get
Yeah.
access to stuff too. So those are huge audiences. Same thing with India. India has a huge thriving podcast industry right
Yep.
now. The whole commercialism though hasn't really gotten to the level that it has in the U.S. with podcasting. I don't know if it will or what's going to happen with that, but I keep hearing people say that outside of the U.S. is just not going on with the host reads or the advertising stuff. A lot of the brands don't care about outside the U.S. So I think we're still early in that on the global business side of podcasting, and it'll probably get better, but maybe advertising isn't something that we should get overly excited about anyway.
I never have been. I figured I've
Yeah.
always been the sponsor of my own show with my own business.
Yeah.
That's
So
so as far as I'm going, I've got a great long 20-year sponsorship deal that I'm still working with.
yeah, so I'm struggling with this and trying to grasp this concept because I think you would probably agree in the early years of podcasting, what you did with your show was really driven by a gut feeling or what the passion was of the creator, right, or the podcaster. But increasingly, I think these technology algorithms are driving us to, be more analytical, be more data driven, be more, trying to cater to what the algorithm's looking for, which ultimately maps back to what the audience is looking for. So, it, I've always had this philosophy that I create a show that self-filters itself, right? So if somebody has an affinity to what I like to talk about or what I like to share, then those people will be attracted here. But I think the reality though now is quite different with so much content that's being produced out there. How do you get people's attention to even get them to self-filter? And that's where these algorithms are coming in. They're basically seeing what these audiences are consuming, and they're saying, well, this audience wants more of that, right? And that's where consumption is now.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I see. There's a tendency and a pull for people to feed algorithms. I've
Yep.
never been one of those people
Yep.
myself, and certainly there's lots of people out there that can support you if you want to learn how to feed algorithms. Howard Thurman
Right.
wrote that or said this. He says, "Don't ask what the people want, or no, don't ask what the people need. Ask instead what makes you come alive, because what the world needs most are people who are alive."
Well, especially now, right, Cliff, with AI coming
That's
in
exactly it. I mean,
and taking over,
I
right?
would rather for me, I'd rather launch a brand new podcast that's audio only, that has no algorithm to feed, that I start off with 20 or 30 subscribers because I knew some people,
Yeah.
and the content is just so spot on for those people because they resonate with me and my message, and they start sharing it with people they know. And sure, maybe there's a little bit of keyword searching in my favor because of podcast algorithm, podcast directories.
Yeah.
And sure, maybe I publish in some social media, and maybe I do a blog post, maybe I create an email newsletter, and I do some other things to drive traffic to my little show. And
Sure.
here's what I love. Kevin Kelly wrote back in 2018, the 1000 True Fans article that I know you know. And that is you don't need millions of people to earn a great living. You can earn an incredible living with only 1,000 true fans.
Yeah.
And depending on who you are, what your industry is, and what your pricing is, I
Mhm.
have a belief that you could actually earn a six-figure income with only 100 subscribers to your podcast.
Wow. Well, so was that what you were doing with all your consulting all these
Yeah,
years, was
that's
helping
exactly
people
what I've
do
been doing.
that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So for me, here's what happened. This I didn't bring this aspect of it up. Here's what was going on. I went to Platform Conference for Michael Hyatt after he wrote his book, Platform: How to Get Noticed in a Noisy World.
Yeah.
I got on stage and I convinced 100 people in the audience were convinced and committed to creating an audio podcast within 90 days as their platform. And then afterwards, people said, "Cliff, I want to do exactly what you did." And they told me what they meant by that. And what I realized is, oh my gosh, these people want to create a podcast and hope that they can leave their day job within 12 months. And they think that if I just create a podcast and build an audience, I'll be able to leave my day job and have, this great income. I'm like, no, 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 no. Please understand, I podcasted for 2 years as a hobby, created 7 to 15 podcast episodes a week, every single week. I put about 30 to 40 hours for 2 years as a hobby into this. I went full-time self-employed, and in 2008, I worked around the clock, 12 to 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. For the first 9 months, didn't take a single day off, and I only made $11,000 personal net income after taxes for the whole year. And I celebrated with a 24-hour nonstop podcast marathon where I recorded 24 one-hour shows within 24 hours and then published those as I was recording them. And then after I published the 24th episode, I went to the hospital to celebrate where I almost died. And I said, "I hope you
Right.
don't do what I did." And, basically what I realized is there were so many people who were hiring me to help them launch a podcast because they thought that's how I build a profitable business. And I'm like, "No, don't do that. Before you launch your podcast, let's you and I talk about your business. Let's find your target audience. Let's validate a product or service. Make sure there's a market to need mix here, match. You've got to get these 7 steps down before you launch that podcast." And I'm like, and so that's another reason why I went down that route. I'm like, okay, do you have a podcast and you've been creating content for years and you're still not making at least $10,000 a month every single month consistently? If not, I know exactly why. Let's jump on a call. I'll talk to you about it.
I think that's what a lot of people need to hear, Cliff.
Yeah, that's why the podcast answer
There's a
man
lot
is
of people
back.
that have been laid off over the last couple of
I
years
know.
that are trying to
Do you,
find their way.
do
Yeah.
you know my house that I live in today is my dream house? It was built by podcasting A to Z. And the reason why I was able to build it with podcasting A to Z is because of the 2008 market crash. Because late 2008, early 2009, everybody was laid off. I had all of these industry experts out there who nobody knew who they were. And today, here they are 500, 700, 900 episodes later, and they're absolutely celebrities in their industry today.
Yeah, like a Pat Flynn or uh,
Heather Bear,
yeah.
Heather Bear was one of my students in podcasting A to Z. When she launched, she created the very first audio podcast for vacation rental businesses. Basically, think about modern day Airbnb, but she started this thing before there was a Airbnb. Today, there's over 100 podcasts in her industry, and guess who they all look up to?
They
Heather
look up to
Bear.
her, right, right.
Absolutely.
And then John Lee Dumas, who's gonna be the master of ceremonies at the Hall of Fame, I'm gonna play a little video intro for him as part of the very beginning of the Hall of Fame that's gonna tell a little bit of the story of John Lee Dumas' early entry into how we got involved in podcasting. It's a very interesting video. I hadn't seen it before. He sent it to me for the use as far as the Hall of Fame, but it's an interesting pathway. And if I think back to my former co-host of this show, Todd Cochran, who passed away in September, he had kind of a little bit of a similar journey in getting started in the early years of podcasting as well. I kind of came out of radio, so it was kind of a different pathway for me. I was already creating content for 5 years before podcasting started. So it was really kind of a little bit of a different journey, but the pathway that everybody starts here is somewhat similar. But what's happened is the expectations have escalated, right? People, if they want to start creating content now or create a podcast or whatever, there's really only two questions they ask you right at the beginning is, can I make money doing this? And how can I make money doing this? And how can I grow an audience, right? Those are the two, which is a marketing question, a promotional question. And in a lot of ways, podcasting is where it's at today because we've had a lot of people over the last 2 years that have started and things didn't go the way they had hoped and they have stopped podcasting, or pod faded is the industry term. And so that's why we don't see as many active podcasts today as we did like back in maybe 2022 or 2021 timeframe. I think we're at like maybe 400,000 globally that are publishing a new episode in once a month. So it's that number has dropped quite a bit.
Yeah, it has. Yeah. And I think sometimes there's self-fulfilling prophecies that are going out. And this, again, yet another reason why I'm bringing back Podcast AnswerMan. When I left my career in insurance in late 2007 and started in January 2008 full-time self-employed, that was at the height of podcasting's plateau at the time, and everyone who had actually made any money in podcasting had all said, Cliff, you're ridiculous. Podcasting is dead. And I'm like, no.
I don't know how many times I've heard that, Cliff, over the years. Podcasting is dead.
Right. Well, and the thing is that this whole thing, well, gosh, you know what? Today, nobody knows and cares what a podcast is. You can do a show every week and have a channel on YouTube, and today everybody thinks that that's a podcast, and so it's a podcast, and the definition of podcasting has changed. And I'm like, no. If I can't subscribe to that podcast via an RSS feed, that is not a podcast. It is a show, and I love that. And there's some amazing YouTube shows, but if I can't get that thing via an RSS feed, it's not a podcast.
Well, you can take that argument to the YouTube folks.
Yeah, that's fine. But here's what I would say. What I'm getting at is I love that those people have a YouTube show.
Yeah.
And I love that they think that they have a podcast. That's wonderful. I bless their podcasting hearts. However, the problem that I am seeing in the world are the number of people who are hearing people say over and over again, podcasting as an audio first platform, it's dead. Everything's moving to YouTube. And just because they're kind of a little worn out and they've lost that loving feeling, their drive is a little low. Yeah. And it's like, oh man, that statement right there gives me the permission to fade myself.
Yep. I can't succeed.
Yep. I've seen a downward trend. It
is a self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and I'm here to put an end to it.
You are. Okay. Yeah. Well, I think that you have some company out there, Cliff. So it's not that you're out there saying this alone in the wilderness here, but it is a little bit of an uphill climb, because I had these battles over this topic with Todd too, around where the industry was shifting, and I think it is shifting towards a heightened view, especially with this recent news about Spotify and iHeartRadio taking content out of YouTube and putting it into Netflix. that news is only going to fan the flames of this, right? Even though the whole Netflix opportunity is probably limited to maybe like 50 shows, maybe max. It's not really an opportunity for most people, but the shiny light is blinking out there saying this is what the future looks like for podcasting. And I don't agree with that it is, but video nonetheless is taking people's interests, and people are enthralled by it. People are watching more of this content on their flat screen televisions in their living room now than ever.
Yeah.
So that is going on at the same time, and that's kind of where this fluid concept comes from. Is this concept that content can go so many different places now. You create what you create, and then just let it flow. Right? It doesn't have to be. I mean, you don't have to call yourself a YouTuber or a podcaster. You just call yourself, you're just creating content and you're putting it out on those mediums or those methods that are part of that synergy. And that's kind of how I'm thinking about it now, is that sure, my RSS feed, I can really call it a podcast, right? Because it's via RSS and I align with that. I spent most of my life advocating for that, or not my life, but most of my work career. And so that is where we are today, is that audiences are perceiving podcasts as a video and audio option, right? And increasingly that's what they would like. But that's not to take away from Apple Podcasts as really the number one consumer or distribution platform for consumption of podcasts. It is. So anyway, on that note, Cliff, I know I didn't give you a rebuttal, but maybe you want to give a rebuttal here, but I wanted to move to taking the Q&A and the questions here.
Yeah, let's move on. I think we're good. If people want my rebuttal, tune in to Podcast AnswerMan and your favorite podcast directory of choice.
Right, especially if you're a audio podcast person. Cliff's the guy to go listen to, I think, because that's a great way of doing it. And also you're just fantastic in helping people monetize what they're doing too, to make a little bit of an income from it. And I think that's important now for a lot of people to even start.
And if video is right for you, I have lots of solutions for you in video. I do want to say that. I not only have I created over 1,000 videos on YouTube, I have a couple of clients that have millions of subscribers. So
well, that's a good experience base, because then you can tap into that process that they had to go through. But let's pull up Dave Canyon, who posted a comment in here. He says, I use a virtual assistant from the Philippines, and she's awesome at unburdening me unburdening me for a very affordable price.
I love that.
Rate.
That's awesome, Dave. I love that. And by the way, one of my favorite shows that I've produced over the years is the Virtual Assistant Podcast, which you can find at virtualassistantpodcast.com. Ironically, there are 38 podcast episodes I did over 9 months. I have not produced a single episode of that show since December 2010, and that show still gets hundreds of downloads to all 38 episodes every single month today.
Wow, that's great. There's nothing like having an evergreen podcast. It definitely continues to grow over many years. If you can do that, that's perfect for monetization strategies that we have in podcasting today. But looks like we have a comment. Oh, thanks, Dave, for the comment. And
Thank you, Dave.
I think you posted another one later on that we'll get to. And Christopher Nessie writes here, what does he say? 2 goats right here. Much respect for both of you for your years and what you've done in podcasting. Well, thank you so much, Christopher.
Appreciate that. It's an honor to be sitting here next to Rob. I remember the very first time I had contact with you, Rob. It's like, oh my gosh, he's like the guy at Microsoft that does all things podcasting. I'm like, I can't believe that I'm talking to Rob Greenlee. And we've been around the block a while.
Yeah. And that was a part of that earlier era, that era zero that I'm talking about, is when was some of my time at Microsoft, and what I saw firsthand there running a consumption platform. I saw what people were gravitated towards, and I worked with all the big media companies that were publishing video into their RSS feeds. That was a big thing back then.
It absolutely
So,
was. I see Rena says that she's rocking the MV7 from Shure.
yeah,
Which is nice that they have all of these different options today, and the look and the appeal and the aesthetic is on point for those who like that look in their podcast.
yeah, it
In
is.
their
I mean,
video.
it's very similar to this mic. I have it on
Yeah.
the shelf back here. I have one as well, but yeah, it's a great mic, Rena, and it makes your podcast sound really good too. So yeah.
Yeah.
And then Dave Canyon wrote another comment in here. I think I said last week as well, I will not cater to the algorithm. I'm not interested in selling any part of my soul for audience growth or monetization. A Popeye once sold, "I am what I am."
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you're pretty firm on that, Dave. So I've heard you say that before over the years that I've known you. So yeah. So keep charging the hill, Dave. I appreciate it. So, well, thank you for the comment, Dave. And it looks like you put another one in here as well. It says, why do you feel that RSS feeds is necessary for not to be a podcast? And why can't a show be a podcast and a podcast be a show? Well, that's a complicated. Do you have any thoughts on that, Cliff?
I will just say that one of the reasons why I think an RSS feed is important is because nobody owns an RSS feed except for you, and nobody can take your RSS feed away. And if given if the option to use your RSS feed, even if Spotify decides to withhold episodes from you, or let's just say if I am removed from anybody's podcast directory, if you have an app that can directly subscribe to an RSS feed, you can always get your content from me. There's no middleman involved, and that is huge. And for me, I never want to lose the ability to directly send my audio files via the media enclosure via that RSS feed. And so for me, that's what makes a podcast. It's what keeps me from my content from being moderated by someone else. It's a direct relationship with my subscriber, and that relationship is something that I protect greatly. And
I think that's all a positive thing. It's all a good thing. And your podcast can be a show.
Your podcast can be a show on any other streaming platform that you want it to be on, but your streaming show can't be a podcast without an RSS feed. You can call it a podcast. And the consensus of a bunch of ignorant people today, and ignorant just means that they are not aware of the facts of the definition, not ignorant in some derogatory way. They just are not informed of the definition of podcast. But a show that is on YouTube that is not subscribable via RSS feed is not a podcast. In fact, I think there was a series in time when Joe Rogan was being told, after they acquired his show and moved it over to Spotify, and it was only exclusively available in the Spotify app. And people said, wow, Joe Rogan's the most successful, most profitable, most income generated podcaster in the world. I'm like, no, he doesn't. He doesn't have a podcast anymore.
Yeah.
I can't subscribe to it via RSS in any of the other platforms other than listening to it on Spotify. But anyway, that's.
Yeah. I mean, and it looks like Dave Canyon posted another one. Why do you say, okay, that's a
just
duplicate.
the same question.
That's the duplicate one. It's like, he says, sorry for the typos, fat fingers. I accept that as an answer, Cliff. Welcome back.
Thank you so much, Dave. I appreciate you being out there and watching the live stream today.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. Barbara Tomlin writes, great show. Rob Cliff is dropping some awesome insight today or tonight, depending
Thank
on
you,
where you're
Barbara.
at. And so yeah, thank you, Barbara, for checking out the live stream tonight. I appreciate it. And so I think that's the last comment that we had come in. So Cliff, so what's your publishing cadence that you have, or
Yep.
when do you put out new episodes for your Podcast Answer Man show going
Yeah.
forward?
So I brought back Podcast Answer Man right where I left it off. So episode 439 was where I left off. I took about 30 or so episodes that were from the Cliff Ravenscraft show over the last few years since 2017. I put those in the Podcast Answer Man feed because there were several episodes that were purely about podcasting.
Yeah.
So that's in there. And then I just published episode 475, which is my announcement that I'm back, and 476. And now every week, if you wake up on Friday morning, every Friday morning, there will be a new episode of the Podcast Answer Man in the feed.
Oh, that's awesome.
Once a week, every week, no more, no less. I want to be a part of your weekly routine. Load me up on Friday, take me to work on that day, or you're going away for the weekend. That's fine. We'll travel together. Let's do a weekend together every weekend at podcastanswerman.com.
Wow, that was quite a pitch there.
Podcast Answer Man.
Man, you got your own jingle. That's awesome. So if you wanted to check out the Podcast Hall of Fame, here's the address. It's just podcasthall.com. Cliff's going to be on stage doing an induction of one of the inductees. So that should be fun to have you up on stage, Cliff. So
it's going to be fun to be there. Podcast Expo.
Yeah, and if you want to check out my YouTube channel, which is where this show is streaming live right now, it's just youtube.com at Rob Greenlee. And there's a bunch of other shows that I produce up there too. And if you want to reach out to me directly, rob.greenlee@gmail.com, or I'm also on X as well at Rob Greenlee. And here is the website address for the New Media Show that is recently upgraded and updated and all fresh and new. And then I'm also on X too at NMS Podcast on X as well. So, and then my personal website is just robgreenlee.com. So I post articles and topics on there that are top of mind with me about what's going on in the new media and podcasting space. So thank you so much, Cliff, for being here with me tonight. It was great to see you again, and I look forward to seeing you down at PodFest in just a few weeks. So,
Rob, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a guest on the show. It's been great to reconnect with you again today, and I do look forward to seeing you at PodFest Expo in January. And if anybody else is going to be there and you've enjoyed anything that I've had to say, please feel free to reach out to me via email, cliff@podcastanswerman.com. And we'll make a point to meet face-to-face if you're going to be there in Orlando in January.
Yeah, I just feel bad that I didn't have you on when Todd Cochran was still with me, and to have that dialogue with him, because he's definitely pro audio, pro RSS too, and you guys could have ganged up on me to some degree.
Well, Todd and I have had so many incredibly powerful conversations over the years, and he and I were very much aligned in many of those things. And I certainly miss him and the podcasting space. That's a void that can't be filled by anyone else. But just want to say how much I honor and appreciate the work that Todd has poured into this industry. Much of it wouldn't be what it is if it wasn't for him. So
yeah, that's true. I'm going to be honoring him at the Hall of Fame too, because he's a Hall of Fame inductee as well. So we're gonna remember him. But
that's wonderful.
I hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for spending time with me and Cliff tonight here on the show. And just know that the RSS feeds with this episode will be up. So if you wanted to, check out it again, or if you wanted to subscribe to this show, just go to newmediashow.com, and there's links to all the places to get it. So thank you so much, and have a wonderful evening. And thanks again, Cliff.
Thank you, Rob.